So the podcast always starts the same way. Where are you from?
I'm from Canada. I'm a Canadian.
All right. You're Canadian. You are Canadian. This is a surprise to everyone now.
And this is where the American says, well, where in Canada? And usually I say, well, they're not going to know my Western Canada. And then they're like, where in Western Canada? And then as Alberta, Magrath, and then usually like, oh, I knew somebody from Magrath once, or I knew somebody from Raymond or Cardston. So a super small town just over the Montana border. We're about 25 minutes from the border in Montana.
Okay. And you say super small town, but like that depends on where you're from, right? I feel like small towns in South, in South America, there could still be, hundreds of thousands of people, or I know there's smaller towns, but yeah, I looked at Wiki, it said, it's something like 2,500 people in Magrath. Is that about right? Yeah.
That's why I always say super small, because
that's a good call.
People always say, oh, 30,000 people or 40,000, yeah, we have 2,400 people. So, most likely a lot of people will have that many people in the high school that they went to. I had 54 people in my graduating class in high school, and probably 90% of the kids I graduated with, I was with since, either kindergarten or grade 1, all the way through. So yeah, it's a bedroom community of a city that's about 100,000 people, but it's, a farming kind of a, old school pioneer town here in Southern Alberta.
Is it still pretty I'm guessing it's still pretty agricultural. It's not one of those places where developers are coming in and just building, buying up farmland.
It hasn't changed a whole lot. I mean, some of the smaller family farms have had to, sell to bigger family farms, or we have a lot of Hutterite colonies in Alberta and Western Canada. So Hutterite colonies are, they immigrated into Canada from Germany probably around World War I-ish. It probably started World War II. They're huge. They live on colonies. They're essentially nonprofits. Nobody gets paid. Everybody works. They go through grade 8. And then after the 8th grade, they stop their education and work on the farm. And so we have, lots of different agriculture, cattle, grain, dairy farms. So
the Hutterites, would that be similar to like the Mennonites? Have you heard of there's some Mennonite communities in the States that are, I don't know if this is right, but somewhat of like an offshoot or similar in some ways to Amish communities?
I would say similar in like community, how their community kind of stays kind of as one. But, Hutterites have, they embrace technology. They have the best farm equipment out there. They split off as they get bigger and bigger. They have to create more colonies. And there's some colonies in Montana that, they'll cross, date and marry and kind of, but yeah, the Hutterites are, they come to town once a week. They're some of the best people on earth, and really have kept the farming community booming in this area.
Thank goodness people grow food so that the rest of us can eat,
Yeah, we don't have the international conglomerate farming companies really have taken over this area. It's still very similar to how it was 100 years ago.
You mentioned a lot of people migrated to the town. The Hutterites did around early 1900s. Has your family been there in the town that long as well?
Yeah, so I 5th generation, Magrathite, you could call me. My kids would be 6th generation. So my great-great-grandfather was one of the first settlers. He was the first mayor of the town, and he was the largest sheep farmer in Canada. They, at one point, was the president of the Sheep Farmer Association in Canada. So farming is in I'm not a farmer. My parents weren't farmers, but when you live in a community for as long as I have, you tend to be related to a lot of different people, right? I have, the Harker side of my family, the Alston side, the Saby side, Cook side is, they're all kind of related.
I was researching, a while ago about the town, and you can see kind of the fingerprints of your family across the town. I was reading about the Alston. I'm not going to get the name. Alston Scout Park. Is that what it was?
Yeah. My great grandma was the first female scoutmaster in Canada.
That's a that's like a trailblazing thing. I mean, to be the first woman scoutmaster in the town, and it was clearly impactful because the park is named after her. It seems like a decently used community resource.
It's kind of, we every year we have a, our town celebration, and they have the parade and stuff, and so the Alstons kind of have claimed we all sit on the curb of that park now. That's kind of a tradition. It's become a tradition. Scouting is a big, my dad was a big scouter. I mean, I still can barely tie a knot, to be honest with you. I went through scouting in Canada. It's not, we call it Queen Venture. Your guys' is Eagle Scout. Ours is called a Queen Venture. I think, tied to the monarchy in Canada being, part of the English territory. But yeah, it's cool. I think one thing that I really, why I really wanted to build a business in Magrath was on my mom's side of it. So my dad's side of the family is more, the Magrath heritage from this area. My mom's side, she's a tanner. So my middle name's Tanner. And my great grandpa Tanner was an entrepreneur here. He started a canning factory, employed half the town. And then my grandfather and his brothers took over and started a window factory called Tanco. So they ran a window factory and was one of the largest suppliers of windows in Western Canada for years and years and years. And so more my mom's side of the family was kind of the entrepreneurial side, and specifically in Magrath where I live.
Are those buildings, are those the cannery and the window factory, are they still around?
The window factory, kind of shut down. They had one of my cousins kind of took it over and just does custom windows, but the building still exists. A hardware store, Home Hardware, which is kind of like a Canadian Home Depot. Home Hardware is a chain of small town hardware stores. They took it over and renovated a little bit, but yeah, the guts of the building's still there. And I remember running around that factory as a kid and breaking into the pop machine and just hanging out with my grandpa's employees. It was good memories growing up.
Your early roots in petty crime, breaking into the family vending machine
in the break room. The employees probably loved that because I don't know how many people probably got free pop because his grandson.
You're teaching all the employees
the system.
Oh, that's awesome. That's taking it from the company fridge, essentially. That's a good story, man. At the risk of training another generation of hooligans, I was going to ask, what your technique was, but we don't have to get into that too much. All right. So you knew you wanted to build a business in Magrath because you'd seen it done before, but before you got to building the business that you're in right now, some other stuff happened, right? So tell me between, what happened kind of going through your high school. Was it 54, 58?
54 kids in my graduating class. I think we had 250 kids in the whole high school, something like that.
All right. So what happened between graduating high school, you and your 53 best friends, to then, what was the next step after that? Did you go to college for a little bit or a while?
Yeah. And growing up here, being Canadian, everyone assumes, I love hockey and I'm a hockey diehard. I'm actually, I don't know, maybe I'm one of the only Canadians that actually isn't a hockey fan. This area was settled by Americans. And so basketball was actually, is the kind of the main sport. And so kind of grew up watching the high school team, always compete and, win our equivalent to state championship, and being a small school, a 2A school. So, we were competing against the schools that had 2,000 kids, when we had 200. And so I kind of caught that bug, and I spent a lot of my youth, probably from, 12 years old to 18 years old, just absolutely obsessed with basketball. So really probably didn't focus on school like I should have, and was always trying to break into a gym to get my shots up every day. My coach in high school played on the national team. He played at BYU. And he told me you got to get 200 shots a day in the gym. And so I took that serious. So that was kind of when my first kind of real love was basketball. And then, after high school, I went and played junior college for 1 year at a local junior college in Canada. And then after that, I decided to go serve a mission. So I served a mission in Mississippi for my church. And that was, I think, the building blocks of my entrepreneurship career was kind of shaped there. In a small town, the only entrepreneur I knew growing up was my grandpa, who had a huge influence on me. I remember driving around doing deliveries with him, or he'd go to construction sites and I would stay in the truck. And then in between, in between driving from site to site, he would talk about how excited he was and how many. I remember once he was bragging to me about how he sold $2 million worth of windows this year, and how, this was in the 80s, and like how excited he was. And the next year they're going to do 3 million. And I had no idea what any of that meant, but I was like, okay, whatever. Like, my grandpa owns a business. And then going as a missionary, my mission president was a self-made entrepreneur. And so being able to just kind of see the way he thinks and the way his wife talked about money kind of, I think, inspired me to want to have that in my life. Right. I remember once, talking about, talking about money, saying, with money, you have options. Without money, you don't have as many options. And so that kind of stuck with me. And so when I came home, went back to school, I went back into education, believe it or not. My dad's a teacher. And so I thought that was like the safe route to take. And my mom would always talk to me about get a job with benefits, which is funny because her dad was an entrepreneur, and it was very successful. But I think after the second year in school, I just kind of like realized, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm fighting this kind of like natural urge to start a business. So that took me into kind of my first shot at entrepreneurship, which wasn't even truly like me starting a business. It's just me deciding to go do door-to-door sales. And so I took a commission-only position and went to Richmond, Virginia, and sold. And every day thinking like, oh my gosh, this is a fluke. Like, I can't believe, I'd wake up the next day anxious, like, oh, I'm not going to sell anything. And then I'd sell 4 or 5. And every day was a fluke until like the end of the summer. I was like, maybe it's not a fluke. Like, maybe this is, maybe I'm making this happen, right? By putting my head down and working hard. So yeah, I came home and I dropped out of school after that summer, and I started my own pest control business at, how old would I have been? 23 years old.
Man. And so you were selling pest control before that. Is that what it was that you're doing in Southern Virginia? Okay.
Richmond.
In Richmond. Those really good pest control guys, they're some of the best sellers I've ever been around. I mean, I bought a pest control service at our house a couple of years ago. I remember the guy who sold it to me. It took him a long time to sell me, but man, he was just a really effective salesman. I mean, and I guess if I just think about it from a numbers perspective, he's probably like the 30th person who'd come to my door that summer. Like, that's impressive. The people who do it and do it well are, there's something to it. I think
sales is like, I have people come up, like my son recently was like, asking me about careers, and if he doesn't want to kind of jump into business, what should he focus on? And I think sales is like, it's non-negotiable. If you want to go start a business, if you want to go be an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to sell. And I don't care if it's, a sales job at a kiosk, a cell phone company, or door-to-door. Obviously, I think door-to-door is absolutely the best training ground. It's not about, a lot of these kids can make really good money, get through school debt-free and pay for it. It's not about the money. It's the education. It's the, like you said, you had 30 different people come by. That one guy just obviously learned the power of influence and being able to, get you to take action without you feeling like you've lost control and that you're being manipulated, right? Like, he's just had a good way of charisma and asking questions and being able to connect and build trust. And that's what sales is. And you cannot go start a business and think, and I talk to tech guys that are starting businesses and they're not good salespeople. And I'm like, yeah, you can hire a sales team, but like, you need to go do your own sales for at least like 3 to 6 months and learn the pain points and what the customer's objections are. And it's just that door-to-door sales, those 2 summers, the first 2 summers I did, just completely changed my life. Like, I think the mission gave me the goals and kind of gave me the vision of what I wanted in my life. But the door-to-door sales actually gave me the hard tools and the soft skills that I needed in business.
I like the way that you separated those two. You mentioned a comment that someone said to you about money and how to think about it, how it gives you options.
Yeah, I remember the training, her talking about, I think she was talking about like one of her grandkids or somebody that got sick, or maybe it was a nephew or niece that got sick or something, and how her husband was able to reach out and they were able to help that family. And then her kind of relaying that back saying, like, obviously money isn't like the goal in life, but if you have money, you have options. And that really stuck with me, and thinking that, that's true. Like, you have at least have the option of saying yes or no if you want to help somebody that otherwise you wouldn't even be a chance, right? So
I think that's
it's weird how little things stick with you, like just little moments that you'll remember that 90% of the other training I don't remember, right?
Yeah, it might have felt like a throwaway comment to her. You never know, but at the same time, it wasn't. It hit you heavy, and you're talking about it again 20 years later. And I love moments like that, man. I've actually been thinking a lot about those, like those little moments that you think might be small in the moment, or you don't realize how big they are in the moment, but then you realize like, oh man, that was really impactful. Like, I can't believe this turned out. I can't believe all these things happened because that one little decision, like this one little nodal point, right? It's like on a chain of things that trickle down. Okay, so you followed Sister Sheffield's advice, solid advice. I'm a big fan. I
planted the seed that made me kind of I didn't want the status quo, right? I didn't know exactly how I was going to make money, but I did have the desire to make money. And I don't think it's never been about like, oh, I want to make money so I can buy that fancy car, or it's just, I wanted to break out of the matrix, right? Like I wanted to have those options. I wanted to be able to make money so that I could kind of control and make decisions and do what I wanted and not have to, dance to someone else's beat or whatever that saying is.
Yeah. I'm making this assumption here, but tell me if this is, if I'm seeing this right. It feels like your desire to be financially secure spread more out of like a desire for abundance, and not just for yourself, but sharing it, as opposed to a scarcity mentality, which is, I've heard stories, plenty of people growing up, I just needed to make money because I was broke poor as a kid. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I'm just trying to understand the difference. Is that, it feels like, you had a pretty stable, your parents provided for you fairly well as a kid. You said your dad was a teacher, so maybe not exceptionally lavish, but is there anything to that, or am I totally misreading? Also, I don't know, like I came from a family with a bunch of kids. And so, even if your folks are making a lot of money, if you have a bunch of kids, it's, sometimes things are a little tight.
Yeah. I think it's your relationship with money growing up. Cause there are people that I know whose parents made really good money, but the way they talked about money and the way they treated it, and then having a scarcity mentality kind of rubbed off on the kids. And so, we were very middle class, right? Like I never felt like I went without, but at the same time, there wasn't a whole lot of extra going on. And the way my parents talked about money was probably a little bit on the scarcity side. And so, I remember growing up, I would get cool clothes and stuff like that, but that was like birthday presents, or like my grandparents. Again, my grandma, grandpa on my mom's side really kind of filled the gaps there, and gave us a lot as grandkids and stuff, and helped out. But I just remember growing up wanting that when I had kids, I didn't want my kids to feel like, I wanted them to have an abundant mentality, right? And I don't give my kids everything they want, but anything they want, I'll provide a path. I'll make them work for it, or do a deal. I'll pay half, you pay half. It's not like I'm paying my kids $5 an hour. I pay them very well if they'll do jobs for me. But it's important for me to make sure that they maybe not have a, scarcity or abundant mentality, but I just want them to have a respect for money. I want them to realize that, the money that we have and the position we're in came from a lot of sacrifice, a lot of hard work, and just have to respect it. Doesn't mean you can't spend it and have fun and go on crazy trips, but just to be grateful and have some respect for the situation we're in.
I like that idea of teaching them to have a just generally a positive relationship with money. And I think that's built on respect. I like that. So something you were talking about a second ago was around, just figuring out creative ways to get your 200 buckets in every day, basically. That's like a pretty scrappy thing to do, I think, as a kid, to just be like, well, we don't have a gym. The easy thing would be like, well, I'll practice at school when I can. We don't have a gym in my house. And it's snowy. So it is what it is, I think that's a unique attribute to have someone as a high school age kid or even younger who has a goal and then just like a scrappiness to be able to get out and figure out how to do this. Has that kind of always been in your nature, or when did that start showing up?
That's actually a good insight, because you can't teach 11-year-old kids how to be a business owner or how to be an entrepreneur when they're 11 years old, right? Mm-hmm. You really have to focus on goal setting and not quitting, right? I mean, all the podcasts I've listened to in my life, all of the people I've talked to who have built, successful businesses or accomplished big things in their life, a common thread that they have is just stick-to-itiveness, right? They don't quit. They're problem solvers. Being a business owner, an entrepreneur, you're a professional problem solver. And so I just remember looking back, I think at the time I didn't realize it, but looking back, I can't even tell you the battles I had with janitors kicking me out of a gym because you're not being supervised. And I'd just be like, what are you, like, all I'm doing is shooting. So I was at the point where I was putting pop bottles in the exit doors of the gym so they wouldn't close. And then I'd go over to the gym at like 10 o'clock at night, climb over the bleachers, go shoot my shots. I was at the point where I knew which janitors were on which shifts at night. And I got to the point, I think in my 10th grade, I just went to the principal and I was like, I brought him a card that I typed up. And I wrote on there I, Bob Nielsen, give Matt Alston permission. I am his supervisor to shoot hoops anytime he wants. And I laminated it. And I remember the once when I was in the gym and the janitor came to kick me out and I just pulled it out and gave it to him. He's just you could tell he was just okay. And then he was frustrated. But I was I was problem solving, but it didn't really, so I think I've always been a problem solver, but it's because I loved the sport and I was a gym rat. And for me at the time, whenever I'd go into the gym and shoot, I felt like it was almost like therapy. I felt like I was in a safe space that I felt like, I don't know, it's a hard thing to describe. Anyone that has hobbies or passions is probably the same similar feeling. So for me, it wasn't work, but at the same time, I would make sure that I was doing my training and I was doing my leading up to the pinnacle in, small town Magrath is high school basketball. If you play sports, right?
As you're describing this, I hear people talk about, falling in love with the process, and it feels like you were kind of in love with the process at this point. But also I'm wondering, was the goal in mind, was that you were like, okay, I'm targeting for high school ball, or were you looking for, you ended up playing college ball too. So was that also the goal, or was it truly just I want to get my shots?
The goal was I just wanted to get as good as I could. I just loved the process. I would get every slam magazine I could get my hands on.
That's a great
pre-internet. I lived in, my poster behind me in my office. It's the same poster I had as a kid growing up. I don't know if you can see
Oh, I didn't realize what it was, but now as soon as you tell basketball, I can tell it's a Jordan. That's a Jordan, right? The wings.
So
that's great.
I just love the process. I never really thought I want to play college ball or anything. I went and played college ball because I didn't want to stop playing basketball. I felt like there was another level to push. So and you play with the same kids growing up. You played summer ball. I played, Alberta basketball in the summers as much as I could. I just loved it. I just loved being able to work on small little things and then being able to implement it into your game.
Something else I love about what you just told me is, I don't know if it was a little or how the conversation went, but this goal of 200 shots a day, that feels like that's a really smart goal from the coach who gave it to you, because that's a challenge, man, to say, hey, you have to get 200 shots a day. Just kind of, that's your deal. If you want to play high school ball here, you got to just get 200 shots a day, because it's attainable, but it's not easy. 200 shots takes a minute, especially if you're doing it by yourself. You're shooting, setting it up and rebounding and breaking into the school to get there too. I mean, it takes a little bit of effort. So there's challenge or reward there. And I don't know. Do you think that goal is that like a common thing that coach would say? Do you know, or was it just something he mentioned to you?
I don't know. I think, I remember my dad telling me, "Oh, I talked to Coach Tallstrip, and this is what he told me." And so, and then I remember being in the 5th grade. My dad was a teacher, so I could get into the elementary gym right after school. So every day I'd be in the gym, like, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour. I remember once I was in there shooting, and in walks Phil Tallstrip, who's like the giant in my mind. He's like the giant of the man. Like, this guy played in the Olympics. He played against, NBA players. He played for BYU. Like, and he rebounded me for a little bit. And I just remember like just lighting it up as a 5th grader. I was like making every baseline jumper. And then he talked to me a little bit, and he's like, "Okay, yeah, like, you have to do that. You got to work on your ball handling. You got to get your 200 shots a day. Like, this is what you're going to do if you want to play for the Zeniths, which is the local high school team." And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, like right from the gospel of basketball in my mind growing up was Phil Tallstrip. So yeah, it was kind of cool. He ended up not coaching for a couple years, and then my senior year coming back and coaching me in my senior year. So that was awesome.
That's freaking cool.
Yeah.
Wow. And so I'm glad you made the comment, because 5th grade puts it also in perspective. I mean, you're 10 years old, basically, roughly at that time. And so this is, I think that actually makes it, to me, that feels even more impactful and impressive, because I'm thinking about what I was doing in 5th grade, man. And it wasn't,
I didn't think about, it was always just kind of like in whatever grade it was, 4th grade, we started doing typing. We had a computer class, and my computer teacher was like, I don't know, today it felt like she was in her 80s, right? She was at the end of her time.
She's probably 33.
But they came out with like this, in Canada at the time, they got rid of the dollar bill, and they came out with a loonie. And so the loonie looks like a gold coin, right? It's like super shiny. And I remember once they brought in this bucket, and it looked like gold. It was 100 loonies in it. And they're like, "Hey, whoever completes the most courses in typing gets to win this $100 stack of loonies." And I remember being like, "Oh my gosh, I am going to win that." And so I started, my parents probably thought like, this kid is freaking crazy. But like, I started walking to school at 7 a.m. and doing like an hour and 15 minutes extra of typing every morning. And I was like, I remember my teacher coming to me and being like, "Yeah, you're doing good. Keep going. Like, you don't want anyone to catch you." Little did I know, like, I had completed like 33 courses, and like the next closest to me had done like 4. And like, she didn't tell me like, "Hey, dude, you got like 15, you're going to win." Like, she kept like making me feel like it was this like, and I went for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, and and today, like, that's why I'm such a good typer, was just for this $100 of gold loonies, right? That I thought as a kid was like magical. So I think I've always been kind of wanting to set goals and succeed, and a little bit competition. I think, anyone that's done anything competitive in their life end up being great salespeople. They end up being great entrepreneurs, because you have to have a little bit of extra motivation in times where it's tough.
Totally.
That's off topic, but yeah, that was my
right on topic.
That was my
That's
typing
perfect.
story when I was in the 4th grade.
Was it? Do you remember the name of the program that you used?
Oh, dude, it was the old computers where we played like Oregon Trail, like one. And I don't even remember what it was called, but it was like this course you had to go through, and I just did the same course like over and over and over,
just
like 37 times.
What did you do with the $100, the 100 loonies?
I don't remember. I probably bought some stupid toy or something with it. I don't even remember. Actually, I think I might have actually got a bank account set up at the local bank, and that might have been my first bank account, actually.
Nice. It's one of those little things, man. Like, I love that they brought in that feels like leprechaun gold. It's kind of the way I'm imagining it, like a bucket of gold. You're like, that's really
and it was new. It was cool. Nobody had loonies, right? It was like the new currency. And so, yeah, my parents just supported it. Again, like, having parents that support kids with their ambition and their goals and help facilitate that. Like, I'm sure my parents had to wake up a little bit earlier and bundle me up, and I, walk to school and it's 20 below, and, they probably just like laughed after I left, like, this kid, what's this kid doing? But they never made me feel like I was like, crazy, and they just always supported me to go for it. So it was that way with everything. My dad would journal, and he would have a communication book for each kid, and he would write in there like, you're doing really good at this, you have these talents, and he would leave it under your pillow, and then at night you'd go in there and you'd write back to him, and you'd leave it, and he did that with all of us, right? And he just really built us up and made us feel like I can do anything I want. Like, so I think a lot of that self-belief came from my parents.
I like that idea of having a communication journal with your kids.
Yeah, it was like a little almost like a pen pal back and forth with your dad.
That's a cool memento. I mean, just like for him and for you, I think about it from a parenting perspective. I like that because sometimes your kids, like, I've had this, my kids are a little younger, but I've had a couple experiences where, like, they want to talk to you about something, but they're like, maybe it's a little awkward or uncomfortable for them, or, or whatever. That ability to write down something, it removes the pressure of having, a grown up sitting next to you, or someone who.
And we were young, right? We weren't like in high school doing this. It started when we were pretty young. So I can't remember exactly word for word that was said, but I do remember how it made me feel. Like, I remember it made me feel like special, and made me feel like I have a lot of talents, and my dad sees these talents and he's telling me I have them. And so it kind of gave me permission, I think, to set some of those goals early on as a kid.
I obviously don't know what his intention was, but I could guess like that feels like a pretty good, that feels like a pretty good measure of success. I bet if you told your dad, like, I don't remember exactly what it said, but I remember it made me feel like, I bet he'd be pretty happy about that. That's freaking cool. Thanks for sharing that, man. That like hit me heavy.
Yeah, no,
that was a really cool side story. I like that a lot. Like that little angle we took.
When you talk about like your childhood and things you did, and you're like, okay, yeah, maybe actually that was an example that kind of had some maybe entrepreneurial skills that I didn't even think about when I was 11 years old or 10 years old, or, and there's lots of those, right? Like, I had a lot of those little mini examples, but just thinking back out of them, I think that self-confidence wasn't just self. We say, oh, you have self-confidence. I don't think anyone has self-confidence naturally. I think, that is built up by our childhood, our parents, our friend group, right? So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. He was a teacher. He wasn't taking me to Hawaii and wasn't able to, maybe give me some of the worldly experiences, but definitely built that self-confidence and that base. For sure.
He was teaching you at home, it sounds like, really effectively. Yep. I like that. This is a little bit, we're getting a little bit ahead, but you talked about success, and I want to, after this question, I think we'll come back to, we were back at you're about to start your first direct sales company. But you mentioned success a minute ago. And I've been thinking recently about how we measure success. And I think when I hear it on social media, mostly people say, the phrase I hear is, when you've achieved a level of success, or if you're looking to achieve a level of success, then X. And I think what it feels like, or what it is usually implied to mean, is when you've made a certain amount of money, or when you're making a certain amount of money, as the definition of success. And what I've heard you talk about is that money is never the goal. But I also heard you talk about success. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on success. If there was a measure for it, if you knew, or just how you think about success in general.
I think my definitions of success has kind of shifted a little bit over the years. I remember before I got married, a quote, Gordon B. Hinckley said a quote once about the truest mark of your success in life will be the quality of your marriage. And I remember that, as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, being like, yeah, I really need to make a good decision on, who my life partner is going to be. I think some entrepreneurs fail is because of who they married. And I think, needing to have that discussion up front that like, hey, like it might be bumpy, but this is what I want to build in my life. This is what I want to do. And I take chances and risk. And so that's obviously a big focus of mine. And I think it's easy to get distracted with the money or the momentum you start building in a business, and you can get distracted away from what really is important. I've always taken my responsibility as a father, as a provider, extremely serious, and I've taken a lot of pride in that. And so like there's nothing that brings me more joy than being a provider. And I look at that, for the future, for having grandkids. I want to be a grandfather that actually lives with intent. I want to be very intentful with how I can influence my grandkids and things I can do for them and help them. But like ultimately with success, I was listening to a podcast probably a year and a half ago, and there was a billionaire on there from England, and he was being interviewed, and he just kind of said a comment about, look, I have a lot of billionaire friends who are miserable. I have a lot of billionaire friends who just bought a $200 million yacht, and he said for him, his goal in life and what he measures success is when his children, adult children, still want to spend time with him and still want to hang out. And so I remember hearing that being like, yes, like I want to have a relationship with my kids, and I want to be the type of provider, not just monetary provider, but like, hopefully they feel comfortable coming to me for advice. And if they want to come back and spend time with me or go on a vacation with me, then I feel like that's really going to be success. Right. And so, my teenage kids don't want to spend a lot of time with their parents because friends are the most important, but we now have some kids in our 20s, and hopefully we can maintain and nurture that relationship as adults just as much as we focused when they were little. So I don't know if that answered your question, but you could be can have all the money in the world, and if your kids are in their 30s and they see you once a year because they feel obligated around Thanksgiving, I'm sorry, but like I don't think you've lived a successful life.
Yeah, I completely agree with that approach. I hope that I don't replay this podcast when my kids are older and then be on the wrong side of this. But I right now, looking at it from the aspect of a parent and a child, I 100% agree with what you're saying. So I also like your idea about living with intent. Has the intent been along the way kind of that some version of that end goal of like, hey, my intent is that I want my kids and my grandkids to want to hang out with me effectively. I'm oversimplifying what you just said, but is that the intent based around?
Yeah. I mean, and we probably get to this later, but when I sold my business and, had the means to make, a bunch of investments or, what do I want to spend this on? How do I want to plan for the future? My wife and I were very intentful on like designing and being like, okay, what do we want in 20 years? What type of relationship do we want with our kids and grandkids? And so we made an investment in building out kind of our dream property on a lake. And we did that, and our kids will inherit that, but we did that as a multi-generational investment, right? It's probably smarter to put that money into some investments and get a better, return on investment and let that compound. But we were very intentful in like finding a property and land that we could kind of grow into and building something, size-wise that we could have 30, 40 people sleep at the lake. And hopefully the idea is, as our kids have families and as they move, or if they live, wherever they live all over the world, that will be a draw. They'll want to come back to the lake because, the cousins, they'll come, they won't have to pay for groceries. They'll be able to, just relax, and we can kind of take everything as an all-inclusive vacation for them. But, that was something we very purposely have designed and done. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity if obviously we didn't have some like, monetary success in the business. But that's something that kind of I love. Like that's something that gets me passionate about and excited about is being able to create that space for the family.
I like that. It goes back to your comment earlier, your borrowed comment from Um, the Sheffield's about how, it gives you options, and it's not the goal, but it's going to give you options, a little bit of money. And so I like that. Okay. So you mentioned just now selling your business. And when you talk about selling your business, are you talking about your direct sales business? Because that's kind of where we left off, where we went on a little bit of a tangent. You had done door-to-door sales in Richmond, and you did it for, you said 4 years, I think. And then, yeah.
Yeah, I did. I sold for another company for 2 years, and
Okay,
then
2 years.
In Richmond, and then I dropped out of school and partnered with some other like-minded, door-to-door sales guys, and we started our own business. And so I went to Tucson, Arizona, opened an office there, ran the sales team, and then from Tucson, I opened up Austin, Texas, office there, and then I was in Houston the next summer, and then I was a few years in Baltimore. And at the same time, we were having kids. We were spending April through September in the States, and then the winter months in Canada, which makes no sense. We're opposite snowbirds. And I think we had 2 kids, and then the last 2 summers we had our third. I would come home back and forth. My last summer, my wife stayed home. It was just getting a little bit too difficult bringing the kids. They were in school. My son was in kindergarten or grade 1 or whatever. And I remember coming home and my son was in T-ball. I played a lot of baseball growing up. Baseball was my dad's kind of passion. So I have a lot of kind of sentimental, I wanted to be involved with my son and play catch with him and kind of, coach his baseball team. And it just so happened that when I was home, we had a lot of rain that spring. And then when I was away, he was at T-ball. And I remember at the end, I didn't get to go to a single T-ball game. So he went through T-ball with no dad. And that just honestly, I was like, I am not going to be that kind of dad. And so that really spurred me on to, okay, I need to find something that I can do that's not seasonal, that I can do in Canada. And, our priority was to raise our kids in Magrath. That was a non-negotiable. And so I needed to find something I could do in Magrath. And so, yeah, I sold out of my pest control business. And then there was my buddy who's about 10 years older than me, but he's kind of one of the other kind of entrepreneurial type personalities that I knew in Magrath. And his name's Lance. And so Lance owned a local bricks and mortar insurance office. And so when I'd be home in the winter, I'd swing by his office. I had nothing to do. I was basically unemployed in the winter. So I just go talk shop with him and talk about business. And we talked about a few different businesses we could start together. And then his dad was at the point where he wanted to retire, and his dad owned a bricks and mortar insurance office in the town next to us. And so he's like, hey, my dad wants to retire. Why don't you, you kind of said it jokingly, why don't you sell your business down there and buy out my dad and we'll do insurance? And I kind of jumped on that opportunity because I knew, insurance obviously is super stable. It's a sales type job. And I kind of wanted to do it digitally, right? I felt hey, that doesn't restrict me from living where I live. I can still compete with everyone in Toronto and Calgary and Vancouver. I'm not at a disadvantage if I do something, online. So I sold my business. I rolled that capital into, didn't take a paycheck from Shurex, the business we started for, 4 or 5 years, and just kind of lived off of my equity that I made in pest control and used that money to hire some software engineers and started Shurex, which is the business that we recently sold.
Would you mind giving us a quick rundown of Shurex in a nutshell?
Sure. Yeah. So Shurex is built to facilitate Canadians to be able to buy insurance across multiple different insurance carriers. So if you think of, you going and buying an airline ticket, you can run to Delta and buy an airline ticket, or you can go to Expedia and buy an airline ticket from any of the providers. So we've built the technology in a similar way to be able to put in your information one time, get insurance quotes for home and auto insurance across all the different major players in Canada, and then be able to pick which one fits your budget and your coverage needs and be able to do all that online digitally.
there wasn't, when you built this wasn't a thing that existed, right? If I wanted to get insurance quotes in Canada, would I just have to call a bunch of different carriers and get quotes? Or
Yeah, in the past, there was either direct to consumer where you would buy directly from the insurance company and have one offer and you would just take it or leave it, or you would have to go through a traditional bricks and mortar insurance brokerage where you'd call them, leave them a message, they'd call you back, ask you a bunch of stuff, get back to you 4 or 5 days later with a price, and then, email you documents you'd either have to, print off and sign, or some are actually, thought they were very modern with e-signature. So we built kind of the first end-to-end, get a quote, compare and purchase and get instant proof of insurance all online, and still provide the customer with a licensed advisor for any advice or questions about coverage.
is there something like this that exists in the States?
There's companies in states that are like aggregators that will like present a lot of different prices, but then when you select your offer, they'll kind of sell your data to that provider and then they'll reach out to you. So they're just more of a marketing aggregator website. I think there's probably a few that are popping up now that are actually brokerages that are binding the policies themselves. But the big players in the States are more lead generators for insurance carriers and for brokers.
That makes sense. So thanks for calling that out. The difference maker is that Shurex is actually a broker. So you're not just then referring to the different carriers, but you're actually able to sell them the policy. This actually this makes a lot of sense. So that brings together what you're describing about the kind of accountability around doing quality underwriting, because you have that accountability as actual broker. Got it. Okay. So I have a couple of questions about this, and that's a really great synopsis. So when we go back to this idea that you wanted to build your life and your family in Magrath. You had already been having a couple of kids and you'd already designed this. Had you already had the conversation with your wife where you talked about, we sat down, we designed our intentional life and we talked about what we wanted and we got really specific about it. This conversation has already happened. Yeah. Okay. Is she also from Magrath?
So her like grandpa was like a principal in Magrath. Her dad grew up in Magrath. Her mom grew up in Raymond, the town next to us. But she actually ended up living in Magrath when she was very little, like maybe grade 1 or 2. And then her dad moved and they moved up to northern Alberta and he worked at a paper mill up there as an electrician. So she would come down and visit her grandma and see her cousins and stuff throughout the year and in the summers or Christmas or whatever. And she always just could recognize the feeling she had when she would come down to Magrath. She just felt like this was, a place that I wish I could live. She had cousins that were here. And so, when I met her and we started dating, like it was very easy. She was probably more pro, I want to raise my kids here than me, because she's had the contrast in her life where she lived in a school where kids were doing drugs in grade 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like just a complete polar opposite of how the experience I had going to school. So yeah, that was non-negotiable for us.
Path forward was, okay. So you start Shurex with Lance, and it sounds like it was kind of like you and Lance figuring out what you're going to do, and then building it forward. But a 5-year timeline, and you had the reserves thankfully to take care of that. But at some point, I talked to a guy once who had done a kind of a solopreneurship, and he was talking about this process of going to work every day. And he's like, if you go to work every day, it doesn't matter what you make. He's like, if you put in the time and the hours and you watch your bank account slowly go up. He's like, sure, you got to pay your bills and whatever, but if he's like, it's a time, it's a quantity of hours times your rate time of thing. But he's like, sometimes he's like, in what I'm working on, he's like, the hardest thing is that I'll go in and often I'm just watching my bank account just keep getting smaller and smaller. And so for 5 years, you're doing that. You're watching your reserves just get smaller and smaller and smaller. How do you deal with that mental aspect of like, okay, 2 months in, maybe it's a little easier, but at some point, as you're just grinding this out, were there ever any points when you were like got scared or like thought about? Let me ask the question different. How often did you think about quitting and pulling the plug during the 5 years, if at all?
I actually don't think I thought about quitting once because I couldn't. Wow. Right? Okay. Like all the chips were on the table. Like I knew that if it failed for some reason, I would know within the first year or two.
Okay.
And that I could always go back to door-to-door sales. I felt like, okay, look, I developed a skill that worst case scenario, I can still feed my family, right? We may not be like super wealthy and have everything, but like, we're not going to be homeless. Like I have a skill, I can go out and I can do sales. I could always start another pest control business. But you know, after the first couple of years, which were really tough, obviously, I would say the first 6 years were kind of the grind. 6-7 years, I could feel the momentum of the business, even though the balance sheet might have showed like, oh, you guys are still losing money or you're not like profitable. Every other point of the business, you know, the people I was recruiting and training how to sell insurance that have never done insurance were succeeding. They were all thriving. Our sales reps we had sales reps making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and we were making nothing as owners, right? So that was pointing to, we had carriers that would give us contracts that they believed in what we were doing. And the software team that we initially hired, or the company we initially hired, we were able to recruit and convince the lead engineer to quit at that firm and come work for us full time. So like there was indications of like all these other people seem to believe in what we're doing. So like I have to believe. I can't, and so didn't really know, how big we would get. I don't think that was ever the intention. We just really focused on improving every day. What can we do in the business today that we have control over, and what can we improve on? And it's just that compound effect, right? Of brick by brick and being able to improve. And then, all of a sudden in 1 year, we do as much volume as we did in 5 years combined, right? And that momentum is pretty powerful. And I think when you build a business, when I talk to my son, I'm like, there's 100 different businesses you could start or you could go buy. But there's only 5 of those 100 that actually give you leverage. So the work that you do, you could compound and you could get paid 10 years for work you did. There are some types of businesses where if you're just billing $300 an hour and you're a consultant or you're like, you get paid for your time. It doesn't compound and you don't get leverage of people. You don't get leverage of technology. You don't get leverage of capital. And so I'm just really grateful that we were in an industry and in a time, a space where we kind of had a lot of different leverage points to maximize, the future growth and valuation of the business.
So did you end up, and this is jumping back a little bit, thanks for going down that, but did you end up buying Lance's business and rolling that in, or Lance's dad's business and rolling that into Shurex? Or did you just totally shut the door on that?
That's actually funny. So I went and got my insurance license. I sold out of my business. My pest control partners thought I was absolutely insane. They're just like, we are finally at the point where we're making more money than we've ever made. Like, you're just going to quit. And this was like, for me in Canada, this is US money. And so it was like worth way more to me in living in Canada. But yeah, I just like, I was like, no, we're going to buy out Lance's dad. And then his dad goes on vacation to Hawaii for 3 weeks. I run his dad's office. He comes back. And then his dad's like, well, I'm not really sure if I want to retire yet. And so we're like, okay. So focusing on the digital side was kind of like something we were going to do in the future after we kind of like took over his dad's office, but that then became plan A. And so I just dove into, first I started doing sales a very traditional way, and not having software, just kind of seeing, okay, I got to prove this to myself. And I think I sold like $22,000 of premium my first week selling, and I didn't really know anything. And I'm like, oh yeah, like this is going to work. And so that's when we started working on, what software vendors should we bring in? What type of CRM? What do we need to do for online quoting? And then just kind of putting the pieces together and starting. So, his dad not wanting to retire was again, some stuff in business is luck. I think that was one of the things that we were lucky that he didn't want to retire, because it put us on a different path. I think we'd have been successful either way, but I think the scale of success would have been a little bit different.
I like that you frame it as luck, because another way that I was thinking you could frame it is, clearly you have the experience, but with a different lens, someone with a different perspective or personality could also call that as a failure. Like, well, there's a failure here. Like, we were going to do this and this guy changed his mind, and that stinks. And so I guess, but you're like, no, this is luck. This is a great opportunity. And I think that speaks to your personality, and the approach that you have as well. This is a little bit random logisticy, but something else I was thinking about that was great is that you were able to buy out of your business. Did you build your pest control business with the idea and the framework of selling it out, or was that like a hard conversation with your co-founders being like, hey, I want to buy out, or you kind of already had that, you had foresight to plan for that?
I mean, I think we had sold some offices in the past. Terminex International had come in and purchased offices for it. Yeah, we had sold some of the offices to Terminex to gain some capital to open other offices. And so we knew like, oh yeah, pest control companies sell all the time. But yeah, it was and I tried to set the terms up so it was best for them, and give them a long payout time. And they're still in business and they're killing it. And they're, top 100 size company in America now for pest control. And they're, I don't think they have any intention in selling, anytime soon. And they've built a great business. It's just, for me, I didn't like the 8 months or 7 months of like, all we do in this 7 months is kind of recruit, and that's like part-time. And I just kind of felt like antsy, like I'm not really reaching my potential. Like I wanted to work year round, right? I wanted to go all in. And so, yeah, it was awkward, but it was what I really felt was best for me. And we did that deal. And I think they're probably glad they got rid of me. They're probably better off now. They're like, we got rid of that Canadian where you...
It sounds like it's probably a win for everybody. I mean,
yeah, I think
it seems like it works out okay.
Yeah.
And so did you ever take early investment in Shurex, or were you bootstrapping it basically from the get-go with your savings?
We bootstrapped it for as long as we possibly could. So we got to one point where we were growing. You asked me if I like to ski earlier. My skis were out in front of me, a little bit too far, and we were just growing too fast and needed some capital. So we actually had an insurance company provide a line of credit, and they actually invested some money. We took a little bit off the table, but not a lot. And then that would, and I think we sold them like maybe 12% of the business, something like that. So we still maintained majority. And then in 2021 is when we actually sold the business to Industrial Alliance. They're a publicly traded business up in Canada. They're in the life insurance and investment wealth space. And they actually own an insurance company in Quebec, but they really wanted to get into distribution outside of Quebec. So yeah, we probably sold the best time you could. 2021 would have been a good time to sell a business, right? When the market was pretty high for acquisitions and mergers.
Yeah, that's true. Was that process? You'd already sold one business, but I mean, I'm guessing it was fairly different. Selling to a larger company. Your company was also obviously significantly bigger. I don't know. Were there any surprises for you going through that acquisition process?
Yeah, I realized that, and no offense to any, I don't know if I'm offending investment bankers out there, but I realized investment bankers are just kind of like glorified realtors. I was shocked at we met with a lot of people talk a good game, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But, we ended up landing with, we hired Raymond James to help us out, and they were good, but really, as a business owner and as a founder, you can't rely on outside consultants to get the job done. They made a lot of introductions and they have the Rolodex, but they didn't close the deal. We closed the deal.
Sure.
Right. And we had one deal with a private equity group out of Boston that, originally gave us a term sheet we accepted, and then that kind of fell through. And then we realized, last night I realized, look, we got to be more in the driver's seat. So we kind of took over, did some of our own outreach and re-engaged IA, they originally were very interested, and then they dropped off, and we re-engaged them like 9 months later, and then got the deal done. So that really surprised me because, you know, you watch movies and you think, oh, you're going to hire an investment banker and then like life is good. Like I was absolutely shocked at how much work it was. Like all I did all day was sign and send back NDAs, do meetings, due diligence, reporting. Like it was a 25 hours a week. Plus we were, you know, at that in 2021, we were probably having one of our largest growth year, you know, premium growth. We were putting on more in 1 year than we were as a business, book size. So that was very, very stressful. 2020 was obviously stressful because we didn't know what was going to happen with COVID. And, you know, the company that originally gave us an investment told us, hey, you guys should really make cuts and slow things down. We don't know what's going to happen. So we had to lay off a bunch of people and get lean. And then 2021, we were able to build that back up. And that's a whole nother discussion of firing people in a small town and how, you know, uncomfortable that is. But I was just absolutely shocked at how much work it was for the founder. I'm glad we did the work because I think I know we wouldn't have got the deal we got if we just relied on the investment bankers.
I want to make sure we come back to that point you just flagged about about, you know, having to have hard conversations and make business decisions in a small town. Cause I think that's really interesting. That process of when you know, there's such an overlap between 2020, 2021, and then later, I'm just wondering, like, this process of going through diligence with other companies and signing NDAs and all that. Were you going on somewhat of a, you know, like a roadshow, so to speak, to visit other companies, or is this all done remote? I mean, I could think if it's early, we could have still, okay. We were still heavily locked down. Okay.
Yeah, it was all remote, which was super weird. People like, yeah, we want to buy your business. And they've actually like never met us in person.
That does feel like, yeah,
which I think is the value of having a, you know, what Raymond James brought to the table was the credibility, because they obviously were like, okay, these guys invented them. And like, you know, they definitely bring value, but like, it's kind of weird how the industry works and you pay a percentage of your value. And so, you know, it was just, you know, as founders, you're like, I don't want to pay them that much money. Like what did they, you know, but
yeah,
it really isn't with the money world, right? That whole industry and acquisitions, it really is who you know and timing of strategy. And so that whole process was like us trying to figure out, what category do we want? Do we want private equity? Do we want VC? Do we want a strategic? You know, and there's advantages of each one of those. Do we want to merge with somebody else? Like we had that opportunity. A couple companies were like, hey, we're gonna merge, but like not let you cash in your chips. Like you're gonna roll it with us. And so we just had, you know, the first 6 months was like just getting an idea of like all the different pros and cons of each strategy, and then narrowing it down to be like, no, we think we want to go with the strategic. And that's why we, you know, ended up doing a deal with Industrial Alliance.
I was wondering about that because I've never been through it on the side of on your side ever, but from some of the options you have, were there certain things that stood out to you versus a private equity company versus the way that you went? And I mean, did people have? I'm assuming that different groups had different views for what they wanted you and Lance to do, and some of those might have been less or more attractive. I'd love to hear all about that.
Well, I think we wanted to take some chips off the table, right? Because we built this business over a lot of years and underpaid ourselves. And I almost feel like going through the process, I almost felt the analogy of like, I remember when like Kevin Durant, first time he won the championship, I felt like after that, he played a lot looser and he was actually a better player the next year. And I kind of felt like as an entrepreneur, I'm like, look, I need to get my championship. I need to get a win. I take off that, and then I feel like I'm going to be a better entrepreneur. I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to be like, oh, I got my money. Like I'm going to go on a beach. I'm like, and so we wanted a partner that understood that like we needed that as an entrepreneur, but we also didn't want a group to come in and like take 100% control and tell us how to run the business and not let us do what we do. And so, being a strategic purchase, they had a strategy of wanting, why they wanted to be in P&C insurance outside of Quebec long term. But they were all still okay with us running the business, staying on for an extended period of time. And then, our next exit, I still own part of the business. I have another exit coming, but it's been pre-negotiated. It's not going to be a fight. And it kind of gives me the reins of if I can keep growing the business, I'm motivated to grow. So it aligns our interests. Felt like with some of the private equity, it was, in some of the meetings, it was very spreadsheet, and it was very like, we looked at this report in January and this is different from this projection. Why? And it's like, if you didn't give them the right answer, they kind of were like, oh, you guys don't know what you're doing, or they were running a business with numbers and with a spreadsheet a little bit too much, instead of like listening to us about what our strategy is. And then maybe as co-founders, we made specific decisions that might have affected the spreadsheet or the numbers for a month or a quarter, but there's a method to the madness, right? And so some of the private equity we just didn't connect on with strategy, right? And that's fine. That there's different business models that work. We want a roll-up model where they're going to buy us. Who are they going to roll us up to? Like, there's no other insurance broker in Canada that were doing what we were doing, right? We weren't a traditional operation where they could buy it and then roll it into a bigger group and get, economies of scale. So, I don't know if that answered your question.
Perfect. No, for sure. It for sure did. And you said you're running a P&C business. I'm not in P&C, property and casualty. Is that what that is?
Yeah, property and casualty. So
okay.
Shurex focuses on home and auto insurance. We trademarked Insurance Marketplace. We own that trademark in Canada. We haven't quite used it in our marketing yet. That's to come in the future. But we built software so Canadians can enter in their details. We can give them pricing of multiple different insurance carriers for home or auto insurance, show them the differences, allow them to easily update and change coverage options. And then we have every person that goes through our system and buys a policy still gets assigned a licensed advisor. But the difference is that licensed advisor not just sells the policy, they're there for them if they have a claim, they're there if they need to make a change. So they get the same consistent person through their experience at Shurex. And then we're, built the technology in the background up with some cool features on the renewal where we can monitor the price. And, we're doing 250, 300,000 quotes a year in Canada. So we know where the pricing is based on the risk profile. And so just being able to be proactive with clients. Hey, you've been with, X company for 5 years. This other company could save you $400 on your renewal. Let's move you, but you're still under Shurex. You're still under the Shurex umbrella, but you're being monitored using AI to make sure that we keep the carriers accountable as well, right?
That's a significant. You're insuring a good amount of population Canada, something like 40 million. Is that, am I rough on that?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, we do that many quotes. We don't sell that many policies, but we're
that's a lot of people.
Yeah, we have a lot of all coast to coast. Yeah.
Wow. And I'm stepping back a second, but something you were talking about a minute ago was the different kind of the approach of the different potential investment firms. And you're running a business. Obviously, it's successful, but you're competing in. Is it fair to call insurance commoditized? Is it like,
I agree 100%. There's purists in the industry. They're like, oh no, it's not a commodity. I'm special. I give advice. And P&C insurance, like auto and home insurance, is 100% a commodity. Okay. All the carriers' coverage is the same, very different, nuances and limits and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely become a commodity.
Well, I'm glad to know that I'm not misreading it though. Thanks for the openness on that. But you're selling in a somewhat commoditized market, but you're finding ways to add significant value to your customers. The part of having a dedicated person who's signed to it. And you told the story I heard on another podcast about how this person was going through a renewal and your software was able to identify, oh, look, you're going to cost you a bunch of money. But if we take, if we take one slight different approach, instead of doing a renewal, we do a new policy, it's going to save you, $600. For Joe consumer, in the States, at least $600, like that's not a trivial amount. Like, $50 a month, that's a good chunk of cash. It's an extra tank of gas or a dinner out with your family. So I could see how someone who's getting ready to accept an investment from a firm, like I could see why that would be an important piece for everybody to see and why you'd want that there. So that's the firm that you have to deal with. IA, that's the firm, right?
Yeah, Industrial.
They were
line.
able to see it. You think that's because they were in the insurance world already? They kind of already knew what was going on?
Yeah, and I think they were just, we had something they don't have, which is distribution. They manufacture P&C insurance in Quebec. So they are a manufacturer of insurance. They do it. They go direct to consumer there. But they really, in order to expand outside of Quebec, if they ever decide to, Shurex, if you don't have distribution in business, you don't have anything, right? And so, they have our knowledge. They have obviously our employees, our employee base to kind of build upon, and our data. Like, actuary science is becoming more and more complicated. I think AI is going to really help in that side of the businesses. And when we can provide data for, all the different insurance companies and all their different prices in different cities and, different risk types, we have a lot of valuable data as well that, insurance carriers, I think, would find very useful.
I mean, you talk about AI, and you talked about also your, early on when your plan A to take over the neighboring bricks and mortars agency didn't pan out. You're like, I started selling more digitally, I think is what you said. And you talked about building software right from there. You've been an early adopter of software. I remember conversations with you, a few years ago where you were talking about AI. Now everyone talks about AI right now, but do I remember that right? Shurex has been an early adopter of emerging technologies, and probably fairly effectively. I mean, is that am I remembering that appropriately, that you guys have early on? And I mean, you were doing this way before ChatGPT was around, I guess is another way to say it.
Yeah. I don't know, technology, like just using technology, you're saying we're going to do this, isn't a strategy. It needs to really solve a business problem. It needs to bring some value. And so we first, I knew nothing about software. So, I drove to Spokane, Washington. I flew to LA, met with a firm. I knew nothing. And so I was just knowing I knew nothing. I was very cautious with like buzzwords and I wanted to find somebody that was like excited about our space. So we've hired a company in New York specifically because they were like, we want to get into the insurance vertical. Like we want to, so there was, a little bit of desire there besides just signing another client. And then talking to them and then building the software, we eventually hired a local person who just got his doctorate in machine learning from the University of Alberta. This would have been in like 2015-ish, maybe something like that. And so he came on and we built an internal system called Athena that kind of automated some of our back office, auditing process and had some success with it. And then we hired another graduate, or he was getting his doctorate at the University of Lethbridge, and brought him on for maybe some predictive modeling and stuff in our reporting and shows, so we could kind of figure out who we should target with our online marketing. And so now we do a lot of AI in our online marketing and our targeting, and agents obviously is going to be a big disruptor in all industries. And so my business partner, really, Lance, he loves to learn. He took a analytics course through, I think it was through Harvard or somebody a few years ago, while we were building Shurex. And at the time I was like, are you really, like, it's a lot of time away from the business. And, I was just, okay, and you just trust you that you know what you're doing. And so he kind of caught that vision very early of what we need to do, or what at least the future is going to be capable of. So just this year, him and some of our team went down to Palo Alto. We met with Google. Industrial Alliance is kind of facilitating that, and they kind of want to use Shurex as a case study of what can be done with agents before maybe they roll anything out into their other businesses they own. it's a lot easier to be nimble with a smaller company like we are. And so, yeah, that's what we're excited about 2026 and working along with Google. We have some of their AI agent kind of developers who are going to work directly with our team and kind of train us up and see what we can build to kind of keep ahead of the curve. But practical things that actually bring business, right? Like we're not looking to get into the industry magazine about, oh, you did some agent. Like if it doesn't help us increase retention, reduce costs, or increase sales, like I'm not interested in it just because it says AI, right? So we'll probably have, kind of 2 or 3 agents built this next year and put into the business. And if it doesn't work, we'll pivot, we'll change, and we're not gonna do anything so drastic that we can't undo it. But I think we have to be willing to experiment and waste some money if we need to, right? If it doesn't work.
Yeah. When you look at agents, are these agents that will like one agent on the desktop? Not that, I guess it could be on the desktop. Like will these agents be like, clones where you could see all of your employees having this agent that works, in parallel with them? Or are you looking at agents from, I want to replace an entire employee persona, or is it some combination?
I think it's hybrid. I don't think, obviously there's a million podcasts and everyone has a different opinion. I think I at least look at agents as just a compounding effect for the staff we already have, right? So an advisor being able to, handle say 11 or 1200 customers should be able to handle 3000, right? With the same number of staff. So we should be able to increase our revenue per staff count. I think there's going to be system agents that we build with underwriting and being able to like look at quality of business, because obviously we're not an insurance company, but if we sell a bunch of business to carriers that lose them money, that's a relationship we have to care about. So we do care about quality and loss ratio and these type of things. So I think anything with underwriting or kind of quality assessment, auditing will kind of be more system. And then I think the agents that we have for customer sales, for follow-up with sales, for servicing customers' needs, I think those will be individual agents that will be almost like an assistant. So if I went out and hired maybe an unlicensed assistant for every single one of our brokers, I think every broker could get a lot done, right? Going through their emails, responding to people, creating, tasks based on urgency of those emails, reaching out, voice agents, being able to call clients, So yeah, I just think our advisors, and we're trying to like explain to people that we're doing this not to replace you. We're doing this to like multiply you, right? And allow you to be able to do what you're good at and not be doing a lot of the administrative stuff that wastes your time.
That's great. And I'm assuming, I'm sorry, there was a lag, I cut you off. You're saying there was something more you wanted to say there, I think.
I said we'll just see what happens, right? Like we know we have to do it, and as the technology gets better, and I think, there's a lot of opportunity.
I agree, it's coming, and so we might as well adopt it. Something we traded emails a little bit about was around the this adoption of technology, and AI is here, and I agree with you that it's coming, and it's a really effective tool when used appropriately and effectively, but it feels like every few years there's something that's, coming around. And, we talked about how you've been an early adopter of technology with your company, but it doesn't feel like you've been one to just jump on the bandwagon with every new exciting technology that comes around. Every few years there's something that comes around, right? And it's like, well, this is the thing that has to be done right now. And companies jump on the bandwagon, they write cool case studies and stories about it, and they put it in the industry magazines like you described. And then sometimes they turn into something and sometimes they don't. But what's kind of been your approach on identifying what ones to focus on?
I think there's a lot of boardrooms all across America right now, especially the big companies, where the CEO makes a mistake or a board member makes a mistake, and they turn to the CTO and they're like, "What's your AI strategy?" And they're like, "What's our AI strategy?" It's like, we have to have an AI strategy. Like the shareholders are gonna we don't worry so much about what we're going to do with AI. We focus more about where's the consistent areas of our workflows. We're really big on workflows, and where's the consistent workflows that are consistent between every person in that department. And then we just reverse engineer. Okay, what can we do to automate that? And sometimes it's a bot. Sometimes it might be an agent. Sometimes it might be, better reporting. So managers, can focus where they need to focus. But the more we do that, the more we look at our workflows and then kind of like reverse engineer and ask, okay, what can we do better? How can we save time? How can we save time for the brokers? How can we save time for our billing team or whatever it is? More and more often as agents and as AI is developing, getting better, those are becoming like, it kind of bubbles to the surface and be like, okay, that does seem like a win. And then usually what we'll do is we'll go look and see real world case study where maybe somebody's on the bleeding edge of technology and they've used an agent for sales follow-up, for example. And we'll kind of see, and I'll go to their websites and I'll actually engage with them and see how the agent, and if it makes me feel like, oh yeah, this is like a good experience, then we'll kind of put it to the top of the list as an agent or a solution that we're gonna. I don't know if that makes sense, but like that's our approach. You can't just have an AI strategy that makes no sense to me, right?
Yeah, you're using technology to solve your problem, and you're looking at it from a business perspective, and that sounds consistent with everything you've talked about so far with your approach to solving problems. Which is, there's a problem, can I use technology to solve it? In that the technology may be a laminated card, that the cutting edge lamination to get you into the school gym. Or it might be the CRM that you talked about developing or bringing on, or this AI. So let's pivot back to the comment you made about having to make layoffs in a small town. So this is a two-part question, if I can. One is when you built Shurex, when you decided to start it, did you always know we were going to be a fairly distributed company? I mean, there are 200. I looked online; it said something like 200 employees.
I think we have like 220 people or something like that now. Okay,
and are the majority there in Magrath, or are they?
The majority aren't in Magrath anymore. I think initially my goal, and I was passionate about it because of my grandpa and kind of like, I remember walking through Tanka with my grandpa. I'd go over there after school sometimes and he would be like going around shaking, oh, it's so-and-so, this is my grandson. And he was so proud of like all the employees he had. Like, we have 65 people on this, he was just so, and I just remember being like, that's cool. Like, I would love to create jobs in Magrath. So at the beginning, we only hired people in Magrath.
Okay.
So we were in a super small basement of Lance's bricks and mortar, like totally illegal basement, no windows. I framed up some walls. I got one of the guys I hired early, paid him hourly. We threw up some drywall. We kind of built these little offices. I think there were like 7 of us in like 450 square feet of space. Like and then we were able to buy a couple of the buildings across the street that have been abandoned in our town for like a decade and renovate those and then move in there. And we kind of got that full. So we had like 40, 50 people there. And it was kind of, and then so we bought another building down the street and we got to the point where we maybe had like, I don't know, 60, 70 people like in our town. And then we started hiring, we wanted to expand out east to Ontario. So we started hiring people remotely in Ontario and did that for a couple of years before COVID hit. So then when COVID hit, we already had all of that stuff worked out with training and our IT team for security. And, we had the logistics figured out of, ordering from the supplier and shipping out their system and all that. So for a couple of years during COVID, we probably hired everybody outside of Magrath and got to the point where now we probably have, 30, 40 people that are kind of local and then the rest are distributed across the country. But everybody that's distributed knows Magrath. A lot of people have come back, like we'll do a company barbecue and people will drive, 6 hours from Edmonton, come down, meet everybody, come to our town we had some people come to our town celebration last year. So they all kind of know the story and the roots, but we bought the government was going to tear down an old folks home in Magrath and build a new one. And so we were able to, talk to the government. We took over the building for $1, renovated it. And this was like bad timing. We did all this right before, like we were in construction when COVID hit. 20,000 square foot. We got, we kept 5 of the rooms down in the basement for like suites. So when people do come from out of town, they have a place to stay because there's no hotels in our town. So, but this beautiful building, you know, capacity is about 87 people that could work out of here. And we probably have, you know, less than 20 people, you know, 15 to 20 people work out of this place now. So it's kind of weird working in an office that's like, I think this was my grandma's suite. Like I don't know if it's haunted, our building,
That's
but
funny.
it's weird. We'll have people knock on the door and they'll be like, oh, I came up from Utah or Idaho for the summer. I just wanted to come by and see the building because I have such good memories here, you know, visiting my grandparents. Like we have so many people in the community that are like, hey, can I come take a look at the old Diamond Willow? And they want to come tour the office just because we, you know, instead of tearing it down, we were able to kind of rehab it, keep it alive.
With a town with a legacy and roots like Magrath, I could see that would be, that's meaningful. I mean, you took something that was otherwise going to be, sounds like demolished and gone, and, you know, help people keep some memories there. I like that a lot. But with that comes some complex conversations, I guess, right? You mentioned how things got really unsure during COVID, and you had to make some tough decisions and lay off some folks. These are still folks in a community of 2,500. You still see these people every day. These are people that maybe they went to your high school with you. I don't know.
Yeah, there's pros and cons. I still think building a business in a small rural area has more pros than cons, but definitely, you know, it doesn't happen a lot, but you know, there've been people that we've had to let go with reason. And, you know, those ones don't bother me as much because, you know, I know we do everything we can to help someone succeed. And if they don't want to be here, or if they, you know, don't perform it, that's on them. But at the same time, nobody takes accountability. So whenever that does happen, it's, you know, those guys screwed me over, or they didn't, you know. But the good thing about that is then for that one person, we have 10, 15 other people who have been with the company for 8 years, 10 years. You know, we've been able to hire, you know, we've hired people who are like the valedictorian of their class who, you know, kids are now in school, start as a billing clerk, and over 9 years has worked her way up. And now she's second in command of our finance team, right?
That's
Be able
cool.
to put her through, pay for some schooling and get her designation, and is second in command under our CFO, right? We have a lot of stories like that. We have project managers on our dev side who started as reception. And so if people are willing to be loyal, work hard, not be afraid to like take on challenges, we always want to promote from within and give people any opportunity we can. But then there's times like COVID where like we were forced to lay off, you know, 15% of our staff, and that's not fun, especially when you have to let somebody go when it wasn't their fault and it was, you know, market conditions or the business is shifting, and that's awkward. I've probably become more of an introvert the last, you know, decade than I was before, just because of that. So I don't like running into people at the grocery store. I'm better now, but it used to really bother me, and it sucked. But at the flip side, I see some of these other success stories of people that have really thrived, and being like talent is equally distributed on a percentage basis. There's just as many talented people in a small town as there's a big city. It's just the level of opportunity. And so when you can hire good, talented people, they're going to be loyal. They're not going to leave you and go to a competitor down the street. And I think sometimes they have your back in those awkward situations where if someone is trashing you, they will stand up for you, right? Because they've seen that you actually are on their side, right? And want the best for them. So yeah, it's been interesting employing people in a small town.
That's cool though. I mean, you know, there are two things that stood out to me. One is, I mean, you didn't speak to it directly, but I can hear the compassion that you have for people and the decisions that you made. Obviously you didn't take it lightly, and I can tell that I can just tell that you didn't take it lightly, that these are things that really matter to you and you really care about the people that work for you and have worked for you. I bet people appreciate that. I think people know you, and I bet they appreciate that. I was also thinking about how, from an angle of building company and the development that have impacts our rural community like Magrath. And you know what you're describing with the people who have shown up, been given an opportunity and really developed their skills, man, that's so impactful. That's going to have really, really neat impact. I think that this impact that you've had in Magrath is going to be felt increasingly through years and generations to come. You know, your grandkids will benefit from the stuff that you're doing right now. Like you're benefiting from your grandpa's business, even just the example that you
I
set.
hope so. I mean, I, you know, you can't keep everyone happy,
Sure.
but I hope that the decision of us, you know, staying here, we're like, no, like we don't need to go to Lethbridge, is the city next to us. It's 100,000 people. It's like, I don't need to drive there every day. You know, we're going to give a good opportunity. People can come here. And probably the best part, obviously seeing individuals like take a small role where they're paid, you know, $20 an hour to then making six figures, you know, years later is great, and seeing that progress. But the best thing is like, I'm pro Magrath. I think people with families are starting to see that and move here, and people want to move here. But some of the people that we've been able to like actually move their families here because of work wouldn't have made that jump if they didn't have the job. So I really love, like, you know, I go to like my daughter's like flag football like game or whatever, and I see like these 3 fields going, and I'm like, there's like 9 kids that are playing that all moved to Magrath because their parents or their dad took a job with us and moved here. And we kind of were able to facilitate that. And I know not everybody like values living in a small town, but there are a lot of people that have been able to move here with families. And that, I think, is probably the biggest like positive outcome.
I think you're right. I mean, clearly some people want to live in a big city, but also I think, I don't know how you couldn't not appreciate the value of a small town and the value, like to your point, that those families bring. That kind of goes to the thought of the ripple effects of an employee, you know, like you're not just impacting that employee and the community and, you know, everything from, you know, community revenue and, you know, things like that. But, you know, their kids are having a better life. Because look, kids in every town, we all want them to have more friends around. We want kids to play with, things to do, and things to keep them busy. And you need families, and you need other people in the community to do that. And you're going towards supporting solving that problem, that's freaking cool. I really like that a lot. Like, I appreciate you being so open about those things. Like, it's really, really cool. If you're okay with it, let's talk about you mentioned community development.
I mean, I think one of the other kind of motivators isn't necessarily like, you know, people talk about legacy a lot and like, oh, you built this business and it's a legacy, and like, I don't think of legacy that way. Like, I'm not as concerned about like legacy type of things. I'm more focused on my integrity of like, when people think about Shurex, I just want them to know that like we really did try and are trying to do it the right way, and never want anyone to ever feel like they were shortchanged, or, you know, we took a shortcut with something that we shouldn't have. And so long as my integrity as an entrepreneur is intact, I don't really care about the other stuff. But one of the things about breaking kind of a barrier that's more of a mindset in small towns, I think a lot of people, when we were starting, they're like, what? We told people our second year that we were going to one day have 300 employees. And I can't even tell you, I was like, I should never have said that. Cause like, they literally think we're off a rock, or like, I need to go to a mental institution because it's so far away. You know, a lot of the other businesses, you know, they have 2 or 3 employees, or, oh, you can't start a business in Magrath. You need to go to, you know, a big market. And so, especially now with technology and everything being digital and remote work, like, I really want, and I'm glad that we've been able to kind of squash that stigma of you can't do that in a small town. It's like, actually, I think it's easier to do this in a small town. You know, I think the retention rate of our staff that we had those early years is absolutely unheard of. Like, we had 95% like retention. Like, people were loyal. It was insane. Like, we were not hiring to replace, we were hiring to grow. And I think we've had people that have worked for us that are now starting their own businesses. And I actually have people that are using office space in the basement that I've given them because he's starting his, and I'm like, good, you're doing it for Magrath. Like, let's change the stigma. And, we have downstairs, we have like 35 workspaces that are open. And I think the next step is us maybe opening that up to the community for like a WeWork type of atmosphere,
that's a
where
cool idea.
if people need a place to work outside of their home, they could come to the Shurex office, keep it super cheap for everybody, but try to kind of spur more people that think bigger. Just because you're in a small town doesn't mean you have to think small. We built a massive business in our space, in our industry, as a one office kind of brokerage. And all the insurance carriers are just like constantly like, how did you do that from Magrath? How did you do that from Magrath? Like, I think you could build it and be as big as you want, as long as you're doing it digitally in a small town. If you're going to build a business, don't build it where you think you need to be. Start where you want to raise your kids, and you can go big. You can go big in a small town.
I love that for so many reasons. One is that it goes back to the kind of this theme that I'm seeing of like focus on the business problem. And for you, the business problem is at the root level is where this is where we want to raise our family, and this is how we want to do it. How do we do that effectively? Also, I love the idea of leveraging what you already have. So in this case, I mean, this could be applied for all the things that you've talked about, basically. But in this case of using the billing that you built out, established, okay, well, we have our business here, and now we're looking at it from what's next. How can we continue to help the community? Which sounds like it's always been kind of one of the main goals in general, but that's going to have so many more ripple effects. Bringing those people together, giving them a built-in network and a community of people to work with, and just building a business and having other people around them who are similarly focused in solving problems, and a network of people. The interesting thing about this that you're doing is that there are some communities here, like someone I was talking with in the States, in rural Colorado, they're developing it from and doing really similarly to what you're doing with, finding an old space, building out somewhat of a co-working space, and then giving some resources and, making it affordable for them to work and come together and start a small business for the good of the community. And that can be done. But I like that you've turned that on its head, and just had this approach of, well, we don't have to wait for the community to do it. We can do it ourselves, and it'll benefit the community. And I think that's an interesting, that idea to serve the community. Yeah. Is that unique? Do you think is that like a Canadian thing, or is it just a you thing, or a Shurex thing, or a Magrath thing? Because
I mean, I think I obviously think Magrath's amazing, and I love it here. And I never remember growing up being like, I got to live somewhere else. Like, I got to get, like, it was the opposite. I've always wanted to live in Magrath, but I didn't like the idea of like, I have to settle with my career, or I have to compromise my dreams because I'm in a small town. I disagree. Like, especially anything digital, right? And tech related. I think benefiting the community is obviously like, it's the result of building a business. Obviously, people that want to start a business need to build a business that they're passionate about, and they feel called to, that they're willing to sacrifice for. You're not going to get through the hard times if your like motivation is like helping the community. I think helping the community is a lagging indicator or whatever. Like it's the after effect. It's the benefit, one of the benefits. But yeah, starting a business is super lonely, especially people that do it alone. I'm glad that I had a business partner, and we could, days I wanted to quit, he didn't. Days, he wanted to quit, I didn't. So, but having some space where we can open it up, and people that are, starting out don't feel as alone, because they could be around like-minded people. And that's, I think, what the big city centers have, is they have a lot of more networking events, and they have a lot more opportunities to connect with peers. And so we kind of feel like we have the space, we're not using it. Let's open it up and let people give it a shot and start their own, see what they can do.
Have you had any takers on it yet?
One gentleman that used to work for us on our tech team, and he's gone out and does his own thing now. He's consulting with some, Fortune 500 companies, and he's doing a great job. And we got him set up with a space, and then we're talking to a couple others. And then once we have, 3 or 4 use cases, then we'll open it up and we'll actually announce it and say, hey, for $99 a month, you can get a key card, you can get free internet, you have access to the pop machine, the restrooms, and just come work, out of the space 1 or 2 times a week or whatever. And we'll see where it goes, and just kind of support one another.
I love that idea. And this is, you talked about the pop machine. Look, at some point, someone's going to challenge your story
Soda
about
machine?
breaking into that thing. Yeah. No. You're gonna. I'm just wondering, if someone's going to challenge, like, let's see if Matt's still got it. Let's see if he can still bust into this machine from his old days.
Well, being like ADD, Lance and I are sitting at Subway one day, and we see the Pepsi guy come in, and we're like, "What's the Pepsi guy doing here?" And they're taking out the Coke machine, and they're switching over to Pepsi. So we're like, of course, like, go up to the owner, and we of course buy a Coke machine that we have no need for, but we buy this like this fountain machine.
Oh, it's a fountain machine. Oh, okay, it's not. I'm thinking it's not a.
So we set this thing up, and then we're like, it doesn't come with an ice maker. Crap! So we got to go buy like a $4,000 ice maker. We set this thing up, and we had a fountain pop in our office, and then I remember a few years ago, Lance like found some like Red Bull product out of the States, so we had Red Bull on tap.
Nice. For
a few years, just to keep us going, but.
I like it. Hey, I mean, you're not, it's a rite of passage, I think, to
that's the only perk we have is pop. Yeah, soda.
And potentially discounted work.
You call it soda in the States, not pop.
Either way. That's funny. Okay. So you're building a community co-working space in the basement of the Shurex building, which used to be the old folks' home. And but that's not all that's on the docket for Shurex now, right? What's next? What do you got in the hopper still?
I think like it's been a really weird position to be in, because we've built such a good team, and especially the last few years executive team, where I think I used to think that I was working hard and being productive if I lived in chaos. And I don't live in chaos anymore. And so sometimes I feel guilty, like, am I lazy? Like, have I lost my edge? And I question, like, am I not as good of an entrepreneur as I used to be? Because like, I'm not like, I work less hours now. My schedule's a little bit more open, and I was talking to my wife about that, and she's just like, no, like, you got to realize that like all of the crazy hours and the days and the years you compounded like in the past, like, this is what you wanted, isn't it? So a business could kind of not be dependent on you and Lance. And I'm like, well, yeah, like, so just kind of running Shurex now, being like, okay, I need to be more focused on strategy, and I need to make 2 or 3 really good decisions a year, but not worry about the executing and the operation side as much, because we have really good managers and they're incentivized. And so it's a little bit of a weird transition for me as like a startup guy to now we're more established and scaling the business. So, I think I'm going to always be involved in Shurex, at some point, either be on the board or be more involved in strategy. But I could see myself over the next few years maybe not being as involved day to day with operation stuff, or putting out fires that pop up, and that's a weird place to be, and try to be like, okay, every day I think about another business to start. I'm like, oh, this would be great, I'm going to do this, and then I'm like, wait a second, like, do I want to buy or invest in something that gives me a job and a headache, or do I want to be more strategic and be an investor and invest 1 or 2 things a year that I don't have to like, scrap through. So that's kind of where I am. I don't know if the question was around me personally or the business, but that's kind of, on the business side, scaling up, being more efficient with our agents in the next couple of years. And then from there, it's going to be just doubling down and just investing more on our marketing and our branding and scaling. For this, up until now, we've been able to get away with, SEO, organic, referrals, paid ads, that type of stuff. I think we'll probably take it up a notch and be more higher funnel branding and actually make those long-term investments. So
talk me through that. I don't actually know what the difference is between, I mean, I know SEO and things like that, but what does the next level look like? Is it just more targeted advertising, or?
It's going to be more like traditional brand awareness. right? Helping people understand, some people in Canada, like, I mean, it's probably the States everywhere. They don't even know. They're like, who's your insurance with? And like, sometimes they'll say like the name of the insurance company, but mostly it's usually the broker. They don't even know what insurance company they're with. So educating them on like, there's lots of carriers. Every carrier has a different pricing. It's not like a commodity where if you go to one carrier to the other carrier, it's the exact same. And a lot of people think that. It's like, well, that's the price. I'm like, no, there could be $1,000 difference in price. So educating the consumer, more brand awareness, higher funnel stuff where you're driving engagement, where right now we're more focused on being there, pay to play, when high intent people are searching for our terms or actually wanting you to quote, bidding on that stuff, where the higher funnel will be more them seeing our brand multiple times and then actually going directly to Shurex.com and engaging with our product there instead of like through a search paid avenue. So
thanks for the breakdown on that. So, you mentioned a second ago about how you're like, well, this is it was a question about me or the business. And as you were asking or kind of answering the next part of the question, my mind was also thinking about that. And, for a long time, it's probably been hard to differentiate the two. I mean, you've spent a ton of your time, ton of your life building it. And looking back, it's grown 11 years. Is that how old the company is?
Yeah. I mean, probably 13 years.
13 years. Okay. Thank you. So 13 years, the company's 13 years old. That's a quick rise. You've had a really good growth. Did you know what you were getting into when you started this thing?
No. I mean, I don't think anybody knows what they're getting into when they try to grow a business significantly and try to get, to a size where it can exit. So, I mean, if I knew everything I knew now, obviously, and I could go back and the timing in the industry was, but I also had like some money, like obviously like I would do it a little bit differently. But because we bootstrapped, I think sometimes people fall in love with like, oh, we have this problem in the business. If we had money, we could hire more people and fix the problem.
Yeah.
And like, I found that like 80% of the time you can fix the problem without money. And obviously because we were forced to fix problems without just throwing money at it. I think there's a lot of startup carcasses out there in the graveyard of startups where they got too much funding up front and they just thought, oh, I need more money to solve the problems, and it doesn't. So, I mean, when I sold my pest control company, I was 29, almost 30 years old. So I had youth to my advantage. I think if I went and started a similar business now with some money, I think I could do it a little bit more with less casualties, less stress, because I think I would know how to structure with management, and I think I know how to delegate better, and understanding that 80% is good enough if it's being delegated versus it has to be 100%. And so that took me years and years and years to learn that. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but like if I started again, I would start a business again, but I would do it. I would learn from my mistakes in the past, right?
I'm not surprised to hear that. I think that's a great answer, because what I hear you say between the lines here is that it was hard, but knowing what you know now, you know how hard it was, and it was still worth it. And it's not like it's hard and I would never do it again.
Yeah, it was 100%. Because it's like, yeah, those 10 years of grind, I'm going to get 40 years of the fruit, right? I'm going to be able to help my grandkids with school, or I'm going to be able to help take my kids on a vacation, when they have kids and they're stressed and they're barely paying the bills, and I can kind of take the edge off a little bit. Like there's a lot of reward yet to come. And so it's definitely worth it for sure. It's just for anyone that wants to go out and think they're going to start a business and it's going to be easy. Think however difficult you think it's going to be, you have to 10x that. And if you're still okay with how hard it's going to be, then start the business.
I like him. Because I mean, you're saying that knowing that how hard it is, so you're thinking on the front end, this is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. The effort's going to be whatever it is, and then 10x that, and then knowing what you know on the other side, that means that the value is even better than 10x. The value is 20 or even 10.5 or 11x. So whatever you think it's going to be this hard and it's going to be this good, like it's going to be 10 times harder, but it's also going to be 10 plus times better. That's freaking cool. You know?
instant gratification doesn't
No,
exist.
you're absolutely right.
True success. That's why you see people on social media and they're just flashy and I'm just like, this guy's a poser. Like, this is all fake. Success, there's no shortcuts to success, right? Like,
No.
get rich quick doesn't exist unless you're like some big Bitcoin genius and 14-year-old Bitcoin genius in 2011. It's just, there's no shortcuts. And, I was listening to a podcast the other day, one of the founders of a large door-to-door sales company, and he said that his dad had a quote printed off on the wall of his office, and it said, "Life responds to effort." And he kind of took that as his mantra when he went and started his businesses, was like, it just does. Life responds to effort. And as crappy as it is sometimes to build a business, you have to just have that long-term perspective and just realize that like one day it's going to be worth it. And usually it is if you stick with it.
You said there's potential, like when you're looking at what retired life looks like for you. It's not retired. You don't look at starting a nonprofit. And what does the nonprofit look like for you?
I explained earlier, my mission that I served in Mississippi really changed the trajectory of my life and kind of what I want to do as a career. So I want to start a foundation I'm going to call RM Capital. And in my faith, we have a program called Perpetual Education Fund, right? So members of my church can donate money, and people that live in the Philippines or Brazil or whatever that need money to go to school can take a loan interest-free, get an education, pay that loan back, and then it stays in the fund to help other people. I want to do a similar nonprofit, but for entrepreneurs who want to start businesses. So you get some super ambitious kid from the Philippines, serves a mission, learns English, goes back to the Philippines, goes to school, maybe he takes a loan from the Perpetual Education Fund, finishes, and then he's like, now what? Like, I want to start this business. I need like $8,000. Like, how do I do that? And I want to start a foundation where we'll provide those loans interest-free, but not just those loans, but I want to be able to also go out and recruit mentors and have people donate their time. I'm not going to be asking people for money at the beginning. I'll fund all of this myself, but maybe bring some mentors in where I can match them up and say, hey, this candidate, he wants to start a business. He wants to launch his own accounting company, right? He just graduated with an accounting degree. Match them up with somebody that owns and has ran an accounting company and say, hey, can you like mentor this kid this year and get his business started? And then have them repay the loan and then be able to leverage that and continue to do that. So about 2 years ago, I did my first loan to a guy in Africa, in Nigeria, where he was able to buy 200 chickens and raise these chickens. And then, he wanted to get married. And then he wanted to get into palm oil. And so that was kind of my first experience at doing it. And that's kind of something that I can see myself doing where, I don't want to open up the floodgates. I want to start really small and maybe do like 50, kind of up to 50 loans and track the success. And then from there, just try to scale it and try to go into more countries and try to get, at that point, other people that have maybe had success in their career that they want to donate to the fund and try to kind of build up some capital. And that's something that obviously like my church would never donate money to something that's risky like that. I think it needs to be done through the private sector, through individuals. So RM Capital, I think what will be my next stab at building something.
I love that.
Worthwhile.
I love that. I would definitely say that that's worthwhile. That's really neat. Is the RM Capital, is that Return Missionary? Is that what you're referencing? Okay. So I'm just curious, how did you meet the person that you donated or that you invested in? The story about the chickens in Africa.
So I met somebody on LinkedIn once, a guy that I connected with on LinkedIn. He had some connections of other people that I knew. And then he's kind of a motivational speaker, works a lot with like the youth and the college age kids in his country. And then somebody he's connected with made a comment once about like, hey, I need help, I want to start this, whatever. I connected with him. It's just kind of random. I reached out to the first guy and said, hey, can you vet this guy for me? Is this guy real? Like, and yeah, he was, he messages me literally, like, the gratitude that this guy has. He messages me every single week.
Wow.
For a few years. Like
That's
these
amazing.
are my messages with them. Like, literally, I don't know if you can see this, but like, he messages me
That's
constantly
amazing.
and sends me photos, sends me, anyway, he's super humble. That obviously, changed his life. And not every loan's going to get repaid. I know that. Like,
Sure.
I'm not naive, but like, if 8 out of 10 can get repaid, and then it can roll over to the next, and hopefully build up a little bit of a I don't know what you want to call it, like a graduating class, people that have gone through the program that then could be kind of advocates for it and maybe even help in the future mentor people in their own country. So we'll see if that can take hold.
I mean, I remember reading a study on this when I was in grad school about microloans in developing economies, or just in general. And the repayment rate on them compared to regular loans is just tremendous. It's like 90 something, 90, greater than 95%, I remember. And so, I mean, I think the impact that you'll have there is going to be really, really impactful. So RM Capital is the future.
I think that's going to be where I spend some of my time. I mean, I'm going to make investments. I've made a couple investments already in different businesses, but for something that's going to keep I like to create, I like to start from new. And this, whenever I think about it, whenever I start planning it out in my mind, it does kind of scratch some of those startup entrepreneurial kind of fun things. Though the end goal obviously isn't to make money, but you never know. Like, I may end up having some that come and say, hey, I need $100,000, and it's actually like a business that's like investable, and I might have a side that's nonprofit and a side that's for profit, and be able to support both of those. But yeah, there's, again, like, I go back to talent is equally distributed. I don't believe that, like, just because you're born in North America, you're more talented. There's talented people everywhere. It's just the opportunity, and that's, hopefully we can kind of provide a little bit of capital for some of these small startups.
I like that, man. That's a great place to end this podcast, man. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me.